Hello, everyone. I'm Billy.
And I'm Kamraun. Welcome to the Horse Frog Podcast, home of your two favorite professional digressors and the creators of the Malazan Brotherhood.
Today, we will be discussing Book 2, Chapter 6 of Deadhouse Gates, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is part one of our coverage of this chapter.
This podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it is most definitely not intended to be a replacement to reading the books. Both Billy and I know this to be the best fantasy story ever written and want to share our love of the series with you.
We will be covering the events in the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that have not read the books. We will try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book, but knowing me and my big mouth, I'm sure to spoil something for someone so in it. You know what? I'm not sorry. I've been very good these past few episodes, so I'm not sorry yet.
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
You've been a good boy lately.
Yes, I have.
A quick warning, today's episode contains descriptions of violence. Listener discretion is advised.
Now, our show is listener supported, and if you'd like to support us, we would really appreciate that. You can do so by visiting our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com. Currently, we are posting ad-free episodes on Patreon.
Also, we would really like to hear from you. Send any feedback or comments to contact@horsefrogproductions.com. We have a fun little prelude to the episode today.
Okay.
This has been spawned by our discussion related to the squall of Bacarala, where it came to light that there is such thing as a clouder of cats and a bloat of hippopotami.
Right?
One of our Patreon subscribers, Dane, it's been a while since we heard from him, so
yeah, right on.
Appreciate him reaching out. Sent me an article with 30 names for groups of animals.
Right on.
We're going to play a little quiz game. We're not going to do all 30. I'm going to do the most interesting ones that I find. All right.
Right on. Thank you.
Here we go. What do you call a group of apes?
Oh, my good gracious. I have no idea.
A shrewdness.
A shrewdness? I've heard that before, and it's like, but that is, yes. Okay. Okay. I love that.
What do you call a group of buffaloes? And this is not to be confused with bison, which American bison are what a lot of people think of as buffaloes, but think of an African water buffalo.
Okay. Again, I have no earthly idea.
An obstinacy.
An obstinacy. Okay. I told you the ones I knew. That was all I blew it all. That was all I had.
Well, I mean, these are just hilarious, though. So what comes to mind with this is Crocodile Dundee with that cow that's in the middle of the road that refuses to move, and he like mesmerizes it. An obstinate cow. All right.
Yes, that's great.
What do you call a group of rhinoceroses?
I don't know. Is it something about
a crash?
A crash. Do you know what one of the odd scientific names of the rhinoceros, of the single-horned rhinoceros is?
No.
Unicorn is species genus. I kid you not.
It makes sense.
It makes sense. It's got one horn. So, because the old KJV, the old Bible, has mentions of unicorns in the Ark, and I'm pretty sure it's rhinos. You know.
Okay.
That's a pretty beefed up unicorn. They could, maybe it was unicorns. I got no idea. It could have been unicorns.
I mean, they might have had a taco that walks around pooping ice cream.
Eat it.
You know South Park?
I do know.
Oh, okay.
You're canceled. You're canceled.
Was that in the same episode where they went to space and?
Yes.
Okay.
That's that brilliant episode. It's like they ask him if he has any Juicean blood in him. It's like because he's eating all that crap lock and all that other stuff, and he's like, "Oh, this is great stuff." And he's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, all that. Yeah, it's embarrassing that I even know that. I mean, my knowledge from like season 1 through 18 is almost encyclopedic because I've watched it so much.
I stopped watching. I want to say about season 10, so you have a lot more memorized than I do.
It's still good. It's just I just have kind of quit. You know, it's not that it's bad. It's just I've had it. It's just I'm full. South Park out. I've had it. Yeah, I'm full.
It's been a while since we had any South Park references too. So
easy. Okay. I think I popped a couple off here recently. They were minor. I kept it small. I kept it easy.
All right, I think we got 2 more. What do you call a group of tigers?
And it's not going to be like the other cat stuff, right? Like McClouder or
it's an ambush.
Wow. Okay, that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Did you have cats? Isn't there another name for Clouder? I think
they just have Clouder in this article.
Okay.
I don't think they listed anything else. And I think this is the final one. What do you call a group of peacocks?
Hold on. Is it a pride?
No, a pride was pride of lions.
Lions,
so group of peacocks is an ostentation.
Well, I get that. Yeah, sure.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, this is the last one for sure.
Okay.
What do you call a group of ferrets?
Smelly.
A business.
A business.
Yes. I'll add this final one. I won't quiz you on it. A group of foxes is called a skulk, and we'll leave it at
A
that.
skulk, right on. Okay. You know what's funny is, like, speaking of ferrets and whatnot, I think it must have been a weasel. It may have been a ferret for all I know. But the other day we were at a Sonic, and this it fronts it's on that river, on the Guadalupe River that runs through here, and there was a ferret or something running by this building. I was like, look at that, and I'm not sure. I've not seen a nutria in broad daylight. Do you know what a nutria is?
Yeah, I've seen them. There's a park near us with some ponds, and they have them in there.
Okay, they're not. They look more like beavers, don't they?
Yeah, like a small
Okay.
beaver without the big tail.
Okay. Yeah, because nutria were a problem at that lake, at several lakes here. They'll chew up your property. Of course, they'll chew up your trees and all that stuff because they love. And so I remember growing up, we'd go to this lake house sometimes, and you hear people shooting them at night because it's like they're chewing up your lawn. They're chewing up all your trees. You had to paint them white and put chicken wire around your trees is what you had to do. Seriously.
To prevent nutria from chewing on them?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. I saw a short of a ferret that had gotten into a liquor store, and
Oh, no.
chaos ensued as it
Sure.
was on top of a shelf and then caused a cascade of bottles to fall and
Oh,
break
wow.
and shatter on the floor. And it was just going crazy because obviously the louder the noise. Yeah, that would have been
More
fun to clean
freaked
up.
out. Oh, my word. Yeah.
All right. Book 2, The Whirlwind.
Right on.
Chapter 6. The chapter begins with an excerpt. Quote, early in Kelanved's reign, cults proliferated among the imperial armies, particularly among the Marines. It should be remembered that this was also the time of Dasim Ultor, first sword and supreme commander of the Malazan forces, a man sworn to Hood. End quote. This came from Malazan Campaigns, Volume 2, by none other than Duiker himself.
Right on.
And this excerpt will become relevant later in this chapter. Not what we're going to cover today, but probably part 3 or 4 of this chapter.
Right.
We begin in Skull Cup. Within Beulah's, Benneth sat at his customary table cleaning his immaculate nails with his dagger. He was covered in sweat. Felicin could see that he was enraged and fearful. He was plagued with uncertainties. Before Benneth sat an untouched mug of chilled Saltoan wine. The rim of the mug was covered in flies. The flies brought the memory of Hood's acolyte to Felicin, the man-shaped swarm of death's sprites, the buzz of wings shaping words. And that happened during the cull when they were chained up in line.
Yep.
That was in the prologue. Now, this really surprised me that he's drinking Saltoan wine brought in from Jenna Bacchus. I think it's pretty crazy that they have access to that wine here in Skull Cup.
Kind of like Goodfellas.
In what way?
I don't remember the Goodfellas when the mafia dudes are in prison and they're kind of eating well and living it up, you know?
That was more like house arrest, wasn't it? When they were cooking the spaghetti.
Yeah. But they were doing a house arrest inside of a prison. Yes.
Was that in a prison or was it in some?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
No, it was inside of an actual prison. It was like a federal prison.
Yeah, but they were like shaving the garlic and cooking
it.
I remember that.
That was the only hardness I think they had, was they had to shave the garlic real thin. I guess I got no idea.
Mm-hmm. And they must have quite the wine industry there. They would need to be able to produce enough for all of Jenna Bacchus and accommodate foreign demand as well.
Yeah, don't get me started on wine. Now that I now live next to the Napa Valley of the South.
Are you picking up on any of the knowledge that's available to you there? You going on wine tastings?
Oh, good gracious. No, I think did I tell you the dirty secret?
That none of it's actually grown and made there?
None of it can be here yet. you give it, 2035, then it'll start being the real wine from around here, or 2030. Some of those other places maybe as early as 2030, but they can't. It's a 10 to 15 year thing before they're actually producing really good growing and drinking stuff.
Okay,
so they have to bring it in from elsewhere. So know your gallo. But no, it's quite the thing here, dude. Kamraun, I'm not kidding you. You ought to see this, like the population of that Fredericksburg. It's still 12,000 roughly, but they have an average tourist population. I'm not kidding you. It's got to be 30,000.
Wow,
at minimum. And like I said, this eclipse coming up next year, that's going to be a big thing. We are in the peak Kerrville and Fredericksburg and a couple other places around here, we are in the peak of it, where this is the longest coverage in anywhere is here. It's
Do you
4
have a lot
minutes.
of light pollution there, or is it
No.
pretty dark?
It's pretty well. This is an eclipse. It's a solar eclipse.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying light pollution from the city. So like,
No, it's dark. It's
Okay.
very dark here.
okay,
So it's
yeah, good stars as well.
yeah, it's awesome. But we're expecting to have hundreds of thousands of people from internationally here for that thing. It's going to be weird.
Have fun with that one.
Yeah, I'm going to take some vacation.
You better save up water and food. You're not gonna be able to get anywhere with that many people in town.
Dude, no kid.
Benneth said, "There's light in your eyes again, lass. Tells me you're realizing what you've become. An ugly light." He pushed a small leather pouch across the table to her, then said, "Kill it." Felissen's hand trembled as she reached for the bag, loosened the ties, and removed a button of durhang. Benneth watched her load the pipe bowl. Bodden had been missing for 6 days. Captain Sawark had called in Benneth more than once. Skullcup had been turned upside down in the search, and patrols on Beetle Road up on the rim were doubled. Sinker Lake was dredged. It was as if Bodden had simply vanished. Benneth had taken the disappearance personally since it signaled his control of Skullcup was compromised. He'd called Felissen back to his side because he no longer trusted her. She knew something about Bodden, and he knew she was more than she pretended to be. Hebrick had warned her on the day she left his care to return to Benneth. He said, "Benneth and Sawark have spoken. Be careful, lass. Benneth is taking you back, but only to personally oversee your destruction. What was haphazard before is now precise, deliberate. He's been given guidelines." Felissen had asked, "How do you know any of this?" Hebrick had said, "True, I'm just guessing. But Bodden's escape has given Benneth leverage over Sawark, and he's likely to have used it to get the inside story on you. Sawark's granted him more control. There won't be another Bodden. Neither man can afford it. Sawark has no choice but to give Benneth more control, more knowledge." The Durhang tea Hebrick had given her provided relief from the pain, but it had not been potent enough to dull her thoughts. She'd felt her mind drag her ever closer to desperation. She had fled from Hebrick. Her journey back to Benneth was a panicked necessity. Benneth smiled as she set flame to the Durhang, then asked, "Bodden wasn't just a dockside thug, was he?" Felissen frowned at him. Benneth set his dagger down and gave it a spin. They both watched the blade's flashing turns. When it stopped, the point faced Benneth. He scowled, then spun it a second time. As the point slowed to face him again, he picked up the dagger and slid it back into the sheath at his belt, then reached for his mug. That's an intimidating game. I wonder what his reaction would have been if the point had stopped while pointing at Felissen.
He might have actually hurt that girl.
Yeah, given the dark mood that he's in.
Yeah. Don't think he'd kill her, but he might hurt her.
Yeah, he already did.
Give her a scar or something. Yeah, something.
Felissen said, "I don't know anything about Bodden." Benneth studied her. He said, "You haven't figured anything out about anything, have you? Which makes you either thick or willfully ignorant." She said nothing. Benneth said, "Was it me, lass? Was it so much of a surrender becoming mine? I wanted you, Felissen. You were beautiful. Sharp. I could see that in your eyes. Am I to blame for you now?" Felissen glanced down at the pouch of Durhang. Benneth offered up a wry smile and said, "Orders are orders. Besides, you could have said no." Felissen said, "At any time," and looked away. He said, "Ah, not my fault then." She replied, "No, the faults are all mine, Benneth." That's interesting. She's taking responsibility for the situation. It's a little bit surprising.
Is this to get him to lower his guard to take her back, you think?
I don't know. He already took her back.
Kind of, yeah.
In so much as he called her to his side again, at least.
That's true.
Benneth rose and said, "There's nothing pleasant in the air tonight. The Shigai's begun. The hot wind. All your suffering until now has just been a prelude, lass. Summer begins with the Shigai. But tonight," he didn't finish the sentence. He took her arm and said, "Walk with me."
So we now have a new name for this phenomenon that we get here in Texas. The Shigai.
75% of the year, we have to deal with the Shigai.
With the Shigai, yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Erikson.
Yeah. Benneth had been allowed to form a militia consisting of his chosen slaves, each now armed with a clout. At night, they patrolled the streets of Skullcup. The curfew's restriction would now be enforced with beating, followed by execution for anyone caught out in the open after nightfall. The guards would handle the execution. Benneth's militia took their pleasure in the beating. Benneth and Felicin joined the patrol squad, which was comprised of half a dozen men loyal to Benneth. Loyalty purchased with Felicin's body. Benneth said, "If it's a quiet night, we'll take time for some relaxation come the dawn." The men grinned. And looking at this from her position, that's such a terrible situation to be in.
I know, I wince when I read this.
It's tough.
Yeah, it is.
The patrol walked the streets, watchful but seeing no one else. They came to a gambling establishment called Suruk's. A crowd of Dosai guardsmen was visible. The Dosai captain, Gunnip, was with them. They watched the patrol as it continued on. Benneth hesitated, as if he wanted to speak with Gunnip. He let out a loud sigh through his nostrils and resumed walking. He rested a hand on the pommel of his knife. Felicin became dully aware of something. The chatter of the militiamen had fallen away, and signs of nervousness were evident. She took a button of Durhang and popped it into her mouth. Benneth muttered, "Watching you do that reminds me of Sawark." She asked, "Sawark?" Benneth said, "Aye. The worse things get, the more he shuts his eyes." Felicin slurred the words as she spoke. "And what things are getting worse?" Behind them, a shout followed by harsh laughter sounded, coming from the front of Suruk's. Benneth halted his men with a gesture, then walked back to the crossroads they had just passed. From there, he could see Suruk's and Gunnip's soldiers. Tension filled Benneth's posture. Alarms rang in Felicin's skull. She hesitated, then turned to the militiamen and said, "Something's happened. Go to him." One of them scowled, then growled, "He ain't gived us no orders." The others nodded, fidgeting as they waited in the shadows. That's some loyalty there, huh?
Mm.
The basis of their loyalty sat on a crumbling foundation from the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Well, their only help would come as long as they got paid.
Right.
And I think they see their meal ticket ending with something happening to him.
Yeah, the king, by all appearances, is not so kingly at this point in time.
Yeah.
I think they sense the weakness there.
Yeah.
Felicin said, "He's standing alone, out in the open. I think there's arrows trained on him." The militiaman snapped, "Shut your face, girl. We ain't going out there." Benneth almost backed up a step, then visibly steeled himself. Felicin hissed, "They're coming for him." Gunnip and his Dosai soldiers wandered into view and closed in a half circle around Benneth. Cocked crossbows resting on forearms pointed toward him. Felicin spun to the militiamen and said, "Back him up, damn you!" One of the men spat, "Hood, take you!" The patrol scattered and slipped back into the shadows and the dark alleyways beyond. Captain Gunnip called out, "You all alone back there, lass?" His soldiers laughed. He said, "Come join Benneth here. We're just telling him some things, that's all. No worry, lass." Benneth turned to speak to her. A Dosai guardsman stepped up and struck him across the face with a gauntleted hand. Benneth staggered and swore as he brought his hands up to his shattered nose. Felicin stumbled backward, then twisted and ran. Crossbows thudded. Quarrels whipped past her on either side as she plunged into an alley mouth. Laughter echoed behind her. She ran on. 100 paces ahead waited Dark Hall and the barracks. She was out of breath when she stumbled into the open area surrounding the two Malazan buildings. Slowly, the shock of seeing Benneth struck down spread through her. Voices shouted from behind the barracks. Horse hooves pounded. A score of slaves appeared, running toward where Felicin stood with a half-hundred mounted Dosai soldiers behind them. Lances took some men in the back. Unarmed, the slaves tried to flee, but the Dosai had now completed the encirclement. Belatedly, Felicin realized that escape had been denied her as well. She thought, "I saw Benneth bleed. Now we die." The Dosai horses trampled men and women. Tulwars swung down. In hopeless silence, the slaves were dying. Two riders closed in on Felicin. She watched and wondered which of them would reach her first. In their faces, she saw joy and was surprised at the inhumanity of the expression. When they were nearly upon her, quarrels thudded into their chests. Both men toppled from the saddles. Felicin turned to see a troop of Malazan crossbowmen advancing in formation. The front line knelt to reload while the second line slipped a few paces ahead, took aim, then as one loosed quarrels into the milling Dosai horsemen. Animals and men screamed in pain. A third volley broke the Dosai, scattering them back into the darkness beyond the barracks. Those Malazans and their disciplined approach to battle.
Mm,
Take note on the efficacy against an unorganized group of rabble-rousers here.
yeah, absolutely ruthless, but not. And it's just what you get for having such good discipline.
They're working together. They're covering each other. And when you have an unruly mob like that, that's chaotic and not really following any training or orders, the force of the trained unit is magnified greatly.
Oh yes, and it doesn't take too many people.
If you had enough of the unruly mob, they would definitely be able to overrun them. But in this case, their discipline is a force multiplier.
Yes, exactly. It keeps them scared because they've taken down a few, and they don't know how. That's part of it. Is that discipline scares folks because they're not prepared.
A handful of slaves still lived. A Malazan sergeant barked an order, and a dozen soldiers moved forward. They checked the bodies littering the area, then pushed the survivors back toward the troops' position. Someone near Felicin hissed, "Come with me." She blinked, slow to recognize Pella's face. She asked, "What?" Pella said, "We're quartering the slaves at the stables, but not you." He gently took her arm and continued, "We're badly outnumbered. Defending slaves isn't a high priority, I'm afraid. Sawark wants this mutiny crushed, tonight." She studied his face and asked, "What are you saying?" The sergeant had pulled his troop into a more defensible position at an alley mouth. The 12 detached soldiers were pushing the slaves down the side street that led to the stables. Pella guided Felicin in the same direction. Once out of sight of the sergeant, he addressed the other soldiers. "3 of you with me." One replied, "Has Opan stirred your brains, Pella? I don't feel safe as it is, and you want to split the squad?" Another growled, "Let's just get rid of these damn slaves and get back, afore the sergeant marches to rejoin the captain." Pella said, "This is Benneth's woman." Felicin said, "I don't think Benneth is still alive." Pella frowned and said, "He was not 5 minutes ago, lass. Bloodied a bit, nothing more. He's rallying his militia right now." Pella addressed the others. "We'll need Benneth, Reberid. Never mind Sawark's bluster. Now, 3 of you. We're not going far." With a scowl, the one named Reberid gestured to 2 others. A fire had been started in Skullcup's western arm. Unchecked, it was spreading fast, throwing a lurid orange glow up against the underbellies of billowing smoke. And that certainly sets an ominous background for the remainder of this section.
Absolutely.
That orange glow over everything. It's almost like a forest fire.
It is. Yeah, it's real big.
As Pella dragged Felicin along, Reberid talked unceasingly. "Where in Hood's name is Bethra garrison? You think they can't see the flames? There were Malazan squads up patrolling Beetle Road. A rider would have been sent. The troops should be here by now, damn it." The small party went around the bodies in the streets without pause. Reberid continued, "Hood knows what Gunnup's thinking. Sawark will see every damn docile within 50 leagues of here gutted and left out under the sun." Pella tugged Felicin to a halt and said, "This is the place. Defensive position. I'll be but a moment." They were at Heberic's house. The door was locked. Pella kicked the flimsy barrier aside and pushed Felicin into the darkness within, then followed. She said, "There's no one here." Pella did not reply and continued to push her until they reached the cloth divider behind which was Heberic's bedroom. Pella said, "Pull it aside, Felicin." She did. Heberic sat on his cot. He stared up at them in silence. Pella said, "I wasn't sure if you still wanted her along." Heberic grunted, "What of you, Pella? We might manage." Pella said, "No, take her instead. I've got to rejoin the captain. We'll crush this mutiny, but the timing's perfect for you." Heberic sighed, "Aye, that it is. Feiners grunt. Bodden, step out of them shadows. This lad's no risk to us." Pella started as a massive shape separated itself from behind the hanging. Bodden's eyes glittered in the dimness. He said nothing. That would be scary. And it's pretty impressive that someone of his size could hide so well.
I know. I'm really starting to like Bob. He kind of reminds me of another bear of a man. Kalam, big yet extremely quiet.
Yes. Pella shook himself and stepped back to the entrance. He said, "Feiner guard you, Heberic." Heberic said, "Thank you, lad, for everything." Pella gave a curt nod, then was gone. Felicin frowned at Bodden. She said, "You're wet." Heberic rose and asked Bodden, "Is all ready?" Bodden nodded. Felicin asked, "Are we escaping?" Heberic said, "Aye." Felicin asked, "How?" Heberic scowled and said, "You'll see soon enough." Bodden picked up 2 large leather packs from behind him and tossed one to Heberic, who trapped it between his arms. The sound the pack made when Heberic caught it made it obvious to Felicin that it was a sealed bladder filled with air. She said, "We're going to swim Sinker Lake. Why? There's nothing but a sheer cliff on the other side." Heberic said, "There's caves. You can reach them when the water level is low. Ask Bodden, since he's been hiding in one for a week. Phillison said, we have to take Benneth. Heberick said, now, lass. Phillison shouted, no, you owe me, both of you. You wouldn't be alive to even do this, Heberick, if it wasn't for me. And for Benneth, I'll find him. Meet you at the lakeshore. Bodden said, no, you won't. I'll get him. He handed Phillison the bladder. She watched Bodden slip out through a back door she hadn't known was there, then slowly turned to Heberick, who was crouched down. He examined the netting wrapped around the packs. She asked, I wasn't part of your escape plan, was I, Heberick? He glanced up, then raised his brows and said, until tonight, it seemed you'd made Skullcup your paradise. I didn't think you'd be interested in leaving.
Ouch.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't want to stay with Heberick and Bodden. She wanted to move in with Benneth after a while. I don't blame Heberick for thinking that.
No, I don't either.
Phillison asked, paradise? For some reason, the word shook her. She sat down on the cot. Heberick shrugged and said, Benneth provided. She held his gaze until, after a long moment, he finally looked away. He hefted the pack as he rose with a grunt and gruffly said, we should get going. She said, I'm not much in your eyes anymore, am I, Heberick? Was I ever? She thought to herself, Phillison, House of Perrin, whose sister was Adjunct Tavora, whose brother rode with Adjunct Lorne, noble-born, a spoiled little girl, a whore. Heberick didn't reply and made his way to the gap in the back wall. The western half of Skullcup was in flames, lighting the entire bowl with a grainy, wavering red. Heberick and Phillison saw downed horses, dead Malazan, and Dosai guards as they hurried down Work Road. Beulah's Inn had been barricaded, then the barriers breached. Faint moans came from the darkness of the doorway as they passed. Phillison hesitated, but Heberick hooked her arm and said, you don't want to go in there, lass. Gunnup's men hit that place early on, and hard. Beyond the town's edge, Work Road was empty and dark all the way to the Three Fates Fork. Sinker Lake was on their left. Heberick led Phillison down into the grasses and bade her crouch down, then joined her. He said, we'll wait here. She asked, so we swim to the cave, then what? He said, it's an old mine shaft leading up beyond the rim, well past Beetle Road. There will be supplies left for us at the other end. From there, it's out across the desert. She asked, Dosin Pali? He shook his head and said, straight west, to the inside coast. 9-10 days. There's hidden springs. Bodden has memorized their locations. We'll get picked up by a boat and taken across the mainland. That really surprised me. So Bodden, that madman, has been scouting out these springs while he was missing. That's pretty impressive.
Extremely impressive. And what a beast. To do that, then return to rescue her Bork is pretty awesome, I see.
Well, am I misinterpreting that? Do you think he actually left the caves and was scouting this out? Or do you think he just got their locations from Pella or something?
I think he probably had a map memorized of their locations. But the fact that he's been here hiding and then even he may have scattered out one or two of them just to verify that it was true.
Yeah, because I can't imagine just simply memorizing a map is good enough.
Yeah, so I think he would at least check on one or two of them to verify that the rest of them would be kind of like, okay, I got an idea how this is going to read, kind of deal. But yeah, he did that. Then to come back and wreak the havoc, he's been just terrorizing this town single-handedly is great.
Well, I thought that was just when he escaped, wasn't it?
Well, I think he used. I guess he used this as part of his escape, or when he's. I guess it was when he escaped. He's been gone a week, but people. That's why this police force has arisen.
Yes, the chaos is because they're searching, and part of the chaos was they were searching for him, trying to find him, right? And then the uprising is happening now, which is further causing a problem.
Yeah, it's a perfect storm of all kinds of crazy things going on at once.
And it's escalating very quickly.
And this whole book, dude, I'll bring that up later on at the very end, but escalation.
Okay.
But yes, it's all escalation, dude.
Phillison asked, how? Who? This was in response to Heberick saying that they'll get picked up by boat and taken across to the mainland. Heberick grimaced and said, an old friend with more loyalty than is probably good for him. Hood knows. I'm not complaining. She asked, and Pella was the contact? Heberick said, aye, some obscure connection to do with friends of fathers and uncles and friends of friends or something like that. He first approached you, but you didn't catch on, so he found me himself. She said, I don't remember anything like that. Heberick said, a quote, attributed to Kellanved and recorded by the man arranging our escape, Duiker. Philison said, "A familiar name." Hebrick said, "The imperial historian. He spoke on my behalf at the trial, then afterward arranged to be sent to Hisar by Warren." After a moment of silence, he slowly shook his head. He said, "To save a bitter old man who more than once denounced his written histories as deliberate lies. If I live to stand face to face with Duiker, I think I owe the man an apology." And that's interesting. So Hebrick had denounced Duiker's histories as lies. Do you think Duiker in some ways presented a skewed history given he was friends with many of those individuals who were making the history?
It's very possible. Haboric could have thought that Duiker was not remaining objective as being a historian in particular, or both of them being historians, I guess. But, you're to maintain some kind of distance. For a guy like Duiker, who's part of, basically, imagine wartime reporting as it is in this world is a lot different.
Right.
And going in with a bunch of guys who are just kind of cover your back. It's like, you got some fellows covering your back, but you're kind of on your own.
That story told by Bolt kind of made it sound like Duiker didn't have people defending him, really. He was out there and got pretty messed up.
Doing the same, until he learned to at least try to fight and defend himself a little bit. But that would make it might make certain things different when you report, or because it's not reporting, but it is. I mean, let's face facts. That's kind of what a historian is a reporter and a recorder. But yeah, I think it's all very possible.
A buzzing sound reached them, coming from the smoky air above the town. The sound grew louder. Sinker Lake's smooth surface vanished beneath what seemed a spray of hailstones. Philison crouched lower in fear and asked, "What is it? What's happening?" Hebrick was silent a moment, then he hissed, "Blood flies, drawn, then driven by the fires. Quickly, lass, scoop up mud, cover yourself, and then me, hurry." Glittering clouds of the insects swept into view. Philison frantically dug her fingers into the mud and slapped handfuls against her neck, arms, and face. As she worked, she crawled forward on her knees until she sat in the lake water. Then she turned to Hebrick. She said, "Come closer." He scrambled to her side and said, "They'll dive through the water, girl. You need to get out of there and cover your legs in mud." She said, "Once I'm done with you." Two things here. First, I don't love that these nasty things will dive under the water to bite a victim. Not good.
Oh, my word. Not good. Ugh.
Second, I think it's pretty admirable that she's helping him before going back to finish covering herself in mud.
Seeing a little growth here from her. I think the realization that she would have been left maybe has lit a fire in her. Maybe that might have done something, but also something about them parents. Sometimes when the excrement hits the fan, sometimes they tend to help others. Even this one.
Yeah. It was too late. All at once, the air was almost unbreathable as a cloud engulfed them. Blood flies shot down into the water like darts. Pain lanced through her thighs. This entire next scene is one of those core memories from this book for me. It really leaves quite the impression.
Yeah, it's just straight up horror show. I am horrified by this, and I don't love this.
Yeah, I agree. I do not love this.
You know why I don't love this? Because it's very real. We have things that do this. I mean, we'll talk about this later, but we know about. Think about you bring it up
Bot
later.
flies.
The bot fly. Yes, we have things that do this kind of nastiness. It's like,
yeah.
This is very real. This is very realistic. It's like, I don't like that at all.
Yeah, it's really nasty. All right, let's get to it.
Get to it. Okay, bring it.
Hebrick pushed her hands away, then ducked down. He yelled, "Mind yourself, lass." All thoughts of helping Hebrick had vanished with the first savage bite. Philison leapt from the water, clawed gouges of mud free, and slapped them down on her blood-smeared thighs. She quickly added more down to her calves, her ankles, and feet. Insects crawled through her hair. Whimpering, she clawed them away, then covered her head with mud. Blood flies rode her drawn gasps into her mouth, biting as she gagged and spat. She found herself biting down, crunching them, and their bitter juices burned like acid. They were everywhere, blinding her as they gathered in frenzied clumps around her eyes. Screaming, she scraped them away, then reached down and found more mud. Soothing darkness, yet her screaming did not stop. The insects were at her ears. She filled them with mud and was met with silence. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
So bad, dude.
Oh, it's so gnarly. It's so Fear Factory. That's why I hate Fear Factor. It's like, I just hate bugs. I don't want to put myself in that proximity with that kind of stuff. But this is being attacked by a cloud of these things. That's so horrifying.
When a mosquito or some moth or something gets close to my ear or lands in the vicinity of my ear, I have a complete freak out. So having an entire swarm of them going in my nose, my mouth, my ears, I'd be, my gosh.
Dude, have you ever watched the Alaskan survival stuff?
Yeah, I've seen some of it, but I've never seen it to where the mosquitoes were that bad.
Oh, you've never seen those like thick clouds of black fly mosquitoes? They get up there and do that?
No.
Oh my word, it's awful. They're so thick that you have to put something on your head. You do have to put covering on your head. They go into clouds that thick, and it's bad. And you're like, well, I thought they wouldn't get mosquitoes that bad up there because it's so daggum cold so much of the year. It's like, no, they get them. They're just jacked up on steroids kind of version. It's like,
that's crazy.
Yeah, they're just meaner.
There was this port that we'd go to in Louisiana called Fouchon, and they had these marsh mosquitoes there because there's a lot of saltwater marshes around it because it's way out down there in the Gulf. And man, they love me. It was terrible. When we're waiting to get picked up by a van to take us out of the port, they would just be eating me alive. It wasn't like swarms of them, but I'd easily get 20 bites, just waiting 10 minutes
you're so sweet,
outside.
Dude. What do you want?
They love me, man.
Yeah.
No thanks, Turkish. I'm sweet enough.
I'm sweet enough. Now the missus did like that. She doesn't like a lot of stuff I turn her on to. She did like Snatch.
Yeah, that's great,
dude.
It's so good.
I need to see it again. He took a rally course. Tyrone.
Of course I am.
There's nothing greater to be in that movie. I'm so sorry for a Snatch digression here, but when the music kicks in and we're doing the coursing and they're showing Brad Pitt with them doing the rabbit chase and them running down Tyrone.
That's a great montage. Great
montage, dude.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, the music, the way they cut it together, everything is beautiful.
Everything's absolutely amazing.
Guy Ritchie does some good work, man.
I pretty much like everything that fella does.
Did you ever watch Wrath of Man?
Oh, I still have watched Wrath of Man. The latest thing I've watched of his was The Gentleman, which I love.
I love that. That was great.
That's a great movie too.
Wrath of Man, it's a dark movie.
I've got it in my list.
The tone that he sets between the music and the way he films it, it's just so ominous the whole time. Okay. It's just great, man. I did not expect much from it at all. And yeah, there's some really cool stuff in there.
I absolutely love Guy Ritchie's anything. I absolutely love Guy Ritchie.
Rock and Rolla, I wasn't as into as like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Girls and Snatch. But The Gentleman was great.
Yeah. Gentleman's fantastic. I'm sorry. I even enjoyed his Sherlock Holmes, man.
Oh, those were great. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. was in them too. Him and Jude Law did great in those.
They're fantastic. Those are good, but it's the combination there. Those are great movies. I love those movies. That's all I can think of right now. But
wow, what a digression.
Sorry.
Let's move along.
Guy Ritchie, sorry. Bring it on.
Yeah. Handless arms wrapped tight around Felicin, and she heard Hebrick's voice as if from a great distance away. He said, "It's all right, lass. It's all right. You can stop screaming, Felicin. You can stop." She had curled into a ball amidst the reeds. The pain of the bites was passing to numbness. She heard herself fall silent. Hebrick said, "The swarm's passing. Feiner's blessing too fierce a touch for them. We're all right, lass. Wipe clear your eyes. See for yourself." She made no move. It was too easy to lie still with the numbness spreading through her. Hebrick snapped, "Wake up! There's an egg in every bite, each secreting a poison that deadens, turns your flesh into something soft and dead. Food for the larva inside those eggs. You understanding me, lass? We need to kill those eggs. I have a tincture in the pouch at my belt, but you'll need to apply it yourself, right? An old man without hands can't do it for you." She moaned. He yelled, "Wake up, damn you!" He struck her, pushed, then kicked. Felicin cursed and sat up. She yelled, "Stop it, I'm awake." It's like trying to wake a teenager up. Well, it is trying to wake a teenager up.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Dad.
To be clear, I would not wake my kids up by hitting them and kicking them.
No Bola Young for them.
I'm just saying the difficulty of rousing a teenager from a slumber. Okay.
It's akin to this, yes. Am I correct? You're likening it to this. You would not use this method. I agree.
I would not use this method. I do not condone this method. Moving along. Felissen's words slurred through her numb mouth. She asked, "Where is that pouch?" He said, "Here, open your eyes." She could barely see through the puffed swelling. She did see a strange blue penumbra as it rose from Hebrick's tattoos. He was unbitten. She thought to his comment, "Fëanor's blessing too fierce a touch." He gestured at the pouch on his belt and said, "Quickly, those eggs are about to hatch. Then the larva will start eating you, from the inside out.
Ugh.
Open the pouch. There, the black bottle. The small one, open it." If the scene with the swarm wasn't bad enough, this one takes it to a whole other level.
Yeah.
Because it's just getting worse, escalating to the next nasty evolution here.
Oh, I agree. I just love how he's always got to push it. It's got to keep going. And this is part of escalation. It's just always got to go further. It includes this. Yes, bring it.
Felicen removed the stopper and recoiled from the bitter smell. Hebrick said, "One drop on your fingertip, then push that drop right into the wound. Push it hard. Then the next one and the next." She said, "I can't feel the ones around my eyes." He said, "I'll guide you, lass. Hurry." The tincture was a foul, dark, brown juice that stained her skin yellow, but did not kill the emerging larvae. It drove them out. Hebrick directed her hands to the ones around her eyes and ears as each sluggishly wriggled free. She plucked them from the holes made by the bites. Each larva was as long as a nail clipping and limp with the effect of the tincture. The bites she could see illustrated what was happening around her eyes and ears. In her mouth, the tincture's bitterness overrode the bloodfly larva's poison, making her head spin and her heart beat alarmingly fast. The larva fell like grains of rice onto her tongue. She spat them out. Man, it just keeps getting worse.
It is. It's awful. It's awful.
When she was done, Hebrick said,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You had to take a... Okay, sorry.
When she was done, Hebrick said, "I'm sorry, Felicen." He was examining the bites around her eyes, his expression filled with compassion. A chill ran through her, and she asked, "What's wrong? Will I go blind, deaf? What is it, Hebrick?" He shook his head and slowly sat back. He said, "Bloodfly bites. The deadening poison kills the flesh. You'll heal, but there will be pockmarks. I'm so sorry, lass. It's bad around your eyes. It's bad." She almost laughed. Another shiver rippled through her, and she hugged herself. She said, "I've seen those. Locals, slaves, here and there." He said, "Aye. Normally bloodflies don't swarm. It must have been the flames. Now listen, a good enough healer, someone with high denul, can remove the scarring. We'll find ourselves such a healer, Felicen. I swear it. By Fëanor's tusks, I swear it." She said, "I feel sick." He explained, "That's the tincture. Rapid heart, chills, nausea. It's the juice of a plant native to 7 cities. If you drank down what's left in that tiny bottle, you'd be dead in minutes." This time she did laugh. She said, "I might welcome Hood's Gates, Hebrick." She squinted at him. The blue glow was fading. She said, "Fëanor must be very forgiving." He frowned and said, "I can make no sense of it, to be honest. I can think of more than one high priest of Fëanor who choke at the suggestion that the boar god was forgiving." He sighed and said, "But it seems you're right." Felicen said, "You might want to offer thanks, a sacrifice." Hebrick growled, "I might," and looked away. She said, "It must have been a great offense that drove you from your god, Hebrick." He did not reply. After a moment he rose, eyes on the town. He noted, "Riders coming." She sat up straighter, still too dizzy to stand. She asked, "Benneth?" He shook his head. A troop of Malazans rode up and halted directly opposite Hebrick and Felicen. At the head was Captain Sarwark, with one cheek laid open by a docile blade. Felicen involuntarily shrank back from his cold lizard eyes. Sarwark said, "When you're up on the rim, look south." Hebrick cursed softly in surprise. He said, "You're letting us go?" "Thank you, Captain." Sarwark's face darkened. He said, "Not for you, old man. It's seditious bastards like you that are the cause of all this. I'd rather spit you on a spear right now." He made as if to say something more. His eyes found Felicen once again, but instead he simply reined his mount around. Felicen and Hebrick watched the troop ride to battle back in Skullcup. Another sourceless certainty told her that they would all die. Captain Sarwark, Pella, every Malazan. She glanced over at Hebrick, who looked thoughtful as he watched the troop reach the edge of the town, then vanish into the smoke. A moment later, Bodden rose from a bed of reeds nearby. Felicin clambered to her feet and stepped toward him. She asked, "Where's Benneth?" Bodden said, "Dead, lass." She said, You. But her words were drowned out in a flood of pain that rose up within her. The anguish was more thorough in shattering her than anything she'd yet suffered. She staggered back a step. That's pretty wild. Again, it's really amazing how some people internalize their feelings about their abusers.
I don't know it. It's hard to watch it happen. What's so funny? I'm sorry, funny. Funny in an ironic sense is that Felicin is treated like Clint Eastwood in the last half of the second reel of any of his Western movies. Just before he comes back for revenge. So she's treated like that the whole time in this book, though. She's just beat down. It's hard to watch because she's so young. She gets drawn into that cycle, of crawling back to the abuser, which I've seen it personally. I don't get it. I know it happens. I've seen it. It's hard to do anything but offer comfort.
You can't do anything to come between them.
No.
Because they're going to look at you as the bad person for trying to get them away from them.
That's right.
It's really an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, it's a real bad situation.
Bodden's eyes held steady on her. Heberick cleared his throat and said, "We'd best hurry. Dawn's not far off, and while I doubt our crossing the lake is likely to be noticed, there's no point in making our intentions obvious. After all, we're Malazan." He strode down to the waiting bladders and said, "The plan is to wait out the coming day at the other end of the reach, then set out after sunset. Less likely that any roving bands of Dosai will see us." Felicin followed the two men to the lake's edge. Bodden strapped one of the packs against Heberick's chest. Felicin realized she would have to share the other bladder with Bodden. She studied him as he checked the netting one last time. She thought, "Benneth's dead, so he says. He probably didn't even look for him. Benneth's alive. He must be. Nothing more than a bloodied face. Bodden's lying." Sinker Lake's water washed the last of the mud and tincture from Felicin's skin. It was not nearly enough. What do you think that last sentence meant? Was it referring to the emotional damage she endured?
Are we talking about the reference to Benneth right before that, or the water washing that stuff off of her?
The lake washing the mud and tincture off her, but it not being nearly enough.
I guess it's probably just what you're talking about. It's not enough to wash anything off of her.
The trauma of what is going on.
Yeah. The trauma about all this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just not enough to wash off anything.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Maybe it's like this. It'll wash the dirt off, but it's not going to wash it. It's not going to wash it off, Sure, maybe that's kind of what it's about,
Wait, what do you mean? The mud's going to come off. The tincture is going to come off.
But the memory and the horror still kind of remain, I guess.
Yes, that's what I was taking.
Okay.
When they reached the cliff face, Felicin tightened her grip on the netting and gasped, "I see no cave." Bodden grunted, then said, "Surprised you can see anything at all." She made no reply. The flesh around her eyes had swollen until only slits remained. Her ears felt like slabs of meat, and the flesh inside her mouth had closed around her teeth. She was having difficulty breathing, constantly clearing her throat without effect. She thought, "Surviving this is all that counts. Let Tavora see all the scars she's given me. The day we come face to face. I need say nothing, then, to justify my revenge." And returning to that rivalry backstory, it's pretty compelling. If it wasn't bad enough already with the emotional scars, now there are physical scars to accompany them.
Yeah, she's still, what makes it so rough, I guess, overall, is she's a kid. She's just a kid.
Yeah. We do have to contextualize this in the fact that this is a different world where people grow up faster.
That's
for
true.
sure.
For sure. I mean, look at Sari.
Yeah.
Sari was younger.
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't she have been younger when she was possessed? Yeah.
Yeah, she was 14, if I'm not mistaken.
12, 13, 14, yeah. So she was considerably younger. So yeah, this is a hard world, and it's hard on kids in this world.
Wait, was she 12 and then 14?
Maybe it was
Jenna Bacchus?
Yeah, I think she was 12 and then like 7. I think it was
yeah. Okay. Well,
something like that.
It was at least 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'd have to go back and look it up. But she's in that range.
Yes.
Heberick said, "The opening is under the surface. We need to puncture these bladders and swim down. Bodden will go first, with a rope tied to his waist. Hold on to that rope, lass, else you'll be pulled to the bottom." Bodden handed her a dagger, then laid the rope over the bobbing pack. A moment later, he pushed himself toward the cliff wall and vanished beneath the lake's surface. Felicin snatched at the rope and gripped it hard as she watched the coils play out. She asked, "How far down?" Heberick said, 7, 8 feet. Then about 15 feet through the cave until you'll find your next breath. Can you manage it, lass? She thought, I will have to. They heard faint screams drift across the lake, the burning town's last pitiful cries. It had happened so swiftly. She felt a tug on the rope. Heberick said, your turn. Puncture the bladder, let it sink away from you, then follow the rope. She reversed her grip on the dagger and stabbed the bladder. A gust of air whistled. Like hands, the water pulled her down. In case anyone forgot, it was mentioned that the lake is called Sinker Lake because nothing floats in it.
Yeah, I thought Herboric, I even kind of looked this up because I thought he mentioned limestone, I think.
Okay.
Was the real high content, and I couldn't find anything about it. It was just everybody was more concerned about drinking high limestone content. It's like it's not bad for you. It's just hard water, and kind of deal. But it's not really having any negative health effects. But it's just maybe not taste good or whatever. But here it's just I couldn't find anything about because the high salinity of the Dead Seas makes it so people can't sink.
Oh, that's right.
So
it's the opposite. Yeah, it's the opposite.
It's real buoyant.
You're right.
So it's like the opposite.
Man, knucklehead. I'm over here saying the wrong thing. You're right. Yeah, people float in the Dead Sea.
Oh.
Wow.
So,
okay.
But yeah, it was something about but I couldn't find anything specific.
Okay.
I may not have dug deep enough, but
okay. So it's the opposite of high salinity.
Yeah.
So it's super not salty water.
Super base. I got no
the
idea.
Most thirst quenching water you can think of.
So heavy it pulls you down. It's heavy water.
Maybe it's filled with chubby rain.
Gotcha, sucker. I'm so sorry. Oh, my word.
Phyllis snatched a frantic breath before she slipped under. In a moment, the rope no longer led down, but up. She came up against the slick face of the cliff. The dagger fell away as she clutched the rope with both hands and pulled herself along. Her lungs screamed for air. She felt herself blacking out, but savagely pushed the feeling away. A glimmer of reflected light showed ahead. Kicking out as her mouth filled with water, she clawed her way toward it. Hands reached down to grip her tunic's hemmed collar and pulled her effortlessly up into air. She lay on hard, cold stone, racked with coughs. An oil wick lantern glowed beside her head. Beyond it, leaning against the wall, were two wood-framed travel packs and bladders filled with water. Bodden asked, "You lost my damn knife, didn't you?" She said, "Hood take you, Bodden." He grunted his laugh, then focused his attention on reeling in the rope. Heberick's head broke the black surface moments later. Bodden pulled him onto the rock shelf. I wonder how Heberick pulled himself along with no hands. Also, I imagine swimming would be quite difficult without hands on the end of your arms.
Yeah, just had to kick twice as hard. But I would have figured that Bodden would have had to pull him, but it doesn't sound like unless he was pulling him at this point.
I mean, it says Bodden pulled him up onto the rock. Well, it says he reeled in the rope. So perhaps somehow he tugged on the rope and Heberick burst the bladder and then Bodden pulled him through.
Yeah, Yeah, that's the only way I'm gonna have to see it.
Okay,
because I can't imagine pulling yourself. I mean, you can kind of clinch it and pull yourself soldier crawl wise forward, but that'd be difficult as all get out.
Yeah.
So yeah, he'd have to be pulled through there, I would imagine.
Right. Bodden said, "Must be trouble up top. Our supplies were brought down here." Heberick sat up and said, "So I see." He gasped as he recovered his breath. Bodden said, "Best you two stay here while I scout." Heberick said, "Aye, off with you then." Phyllis sat up and asked, "What kind of trouble?" Heberick shrugged. She said, "No, you've suspicions." He grimaced and said, "Sawark said, look south." She said, "So?" Heberick said, "So just that, lass. Let's wait for Bodden, shall we?" She said, "I'm cold." He said, "We spared no room for extra clothing. Food and water, a few weapons, a fire kit. There's blankets, but best keep them dry." She snapped, "They'll dry out soon enough," and crawled over to one of the packs. Bodden returned a few minutes later and crouched down beside Heberick. Phyllis shivered from under a blanket as she watched the two men. As Bodden was about to whisper something to Heberick, she said, "No, Bodden, loud enough for all of us." Bodden glanced at Heberick, who shrugged. Bodden said, "Dosen Pally is 30 leagues away, yet you can see its glow." Heberick frowned and said, "Even a firestorm wouldn't be visible at such a distance, Bodden." Bodden said, "True enough. And it's no firestorm. It's sorcery, old man. A mage battle." Heberick muttered, "Hood's breath. Some battle." Seriously, that's what, 45 miles away?
Yeah. Well, did I ever mention the artillery practice at Fort Hood?
Yeah, you've mentioned it before. I can't remember how long ago, but I think it was during the Malazan coverage.
But I'll just bring it up again real quick. Just the fact that my grandparents lived about 50, 60 miles away from Fort Hood, and in their tiny town, you thought it was thunder because you could see what looked like lightning, and it's artillery practice in Fort Hood. So I'm kind of curious if is that the equivalent of a mage? Is like artillery in this world?
More than artillery.
Yeah. I think they're a little bit more than artillery. Yeah, they're bad.
Okay. But that does add context then. If a mage is more than artillery, it shouldn't be that hard to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what yeah.
Bodden growled, "It's come." Philisin asked, "What has?" Hebrick said, "7 cities has risen, lass. Dryjna, the whirlwinds come." We are going to stop here for now, and we will continue the chapter next week.
Yes.
For standout moments, seeing how quickly things escalated in Skull Cup once the uprising began was interesting.
Yes.
The visual of the entire town being lit orange from the fires reflecting on the smoke overhead does a good job of setting the visuals for the entire section we've covered so far.
Yeah, I agree very much so. I like that as well. And it is a very visual. Erikson is a very visual writer.
Yes. Seeing the Malazans make quick work of that unruly mob with their tactics and discipline is really cool. I like to see that.
I always like that for some reason. In theory, I like discipline. In reality, I lack it. But I do like seeing it in this situations where they wipe the folks out pretty easily. It's pretty nice seeing that kind of stuff going on. Another thing I really liked was Felissa's realization that they were going to leave her there, and I kind of think this is where it's kind of the start of pulling her head out of her butt, kind of a little bit maybe. She's getting a little more bold.
The first sign that I noticed here was she took responsibility for her position.
Yeah.
When she was talking to Benneth, and then second thing when she was putting the mud on Hebrick instead of on her own ankles.
Yeah,
that was interesting, or on her own thighs rather.
Yeah,
that was interesting, showing some concern for somebody beside herself.
Yes.
Yeah, so definitely some progression there from a character growth perspective.
Very much so.
The tidbit about Duiker still rescuing Hebrick, even though Hebrick had spoken out against him, made me like Duiker even more.
Oh yeah, it speaks a lot to Duiker's character, and we'll come to him later on in this chapter too, for more reasons to like this guy.
The entire bloodfly scene was horrific. What a nasty insect. Yeah. And I wonder if botflies are the inspiration for them.
That's the only thing I've got. I would have to imagine it's some influence on that.
Yeah.
So similar.
Because it's my understanding that if a botfly lands on cattle, say, and they lay one of their larvae in them, it ruins the hide because it makes a hole in it.
Yeah, it does.
They're that nasty. Terrible. Finding out all the preparations Bodden had made really showed his skill set off. Yes. What a formidable individual he's turning out to be.
I agree, and I kind of would like to see him and Kalam.
The mage battle in Dosin Pali being visible from 30 leagues away was impressive.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, you got any final thoughts before you drop off here?
No, I just love, like I said earlier, Erikson is always all escalation. I don't know how he does it. I feel that so many things I watch and read always have about 10 minutes of action for every 6 hours you spend watching/reading. You then spend the other 6 hours discussing how everyone was affected by this and how they felt about this 10 minutes of action. Lather, rinse, and repeat. Erikson just adds fuel to the fire every chapter, man. I don't know how he does it, but he just constantly throws more on there. It's like, here you go. Here's some more. It's like the reverse. It's like he'll spend 10 minutes reflecting on what it was. We'll spend 5 hours of action.
Yeah, there's some rather prolonged sequences of action that take place.
Well, this whole chapter is one prolonged action sequence, isn't it?
Well, I mean, even after the last one, building up to this, right?
Yes, sir.
The last one was quite eventful.
Yeah. It just keeps right.
And then this one here is turning out to be another one.
It's just absolutely masterful. I love it.
I remember talking to some first-time readers. They mentioned that they were bored to death in the first third of this book.
What?
But going through it now, there's been a couple of slower sections.
Sure.
But overall, it's been pretty eventful, I feel.
I think the brutal opening earned it a couple of chapters of leeway for any new readers. I mean, please, come on. That prologue is one of the most hateful things I've ever read, period. It's like that ought to buy y'all
Yeah, it's
something.
pretty bad.
It's like, that ought to buy you something. Is that's more action than some books have in it entirely.
Maybe it's what have you done for me lately, Billy?
What
have you done for me lately this chapter?
I guess that's got to be it, man. That's got to be it. I don't know, because I'm like you, as I do the reread, it's like, how did I ever think any of this was not just amazing from front to end? I mean, I thought it was amazing, but
we'll see. There's some sequences that I have trouble with in the later books.
Sure,
some specific stuff comes to mind that are challenging for me in particular, but other people like it.
Right.
So we'll see. Maybe my perspective will be different this time.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Given I'm also 12 years older than I was when I started reading it first time, so
that may
different
help.
Perspective on life too. Yeah. All right, cool. Great job tonight, Billy.
Hey, thanks. Well, it was a great job. I had a great time tonight, man. Real fun time.
Yeah.
As always.
All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you next week.
See y'all next week.
We thank you all for joining us today.
Again, we really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at horsefrogproductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.